polymer in it. And then the polymer is put inside of the bioreactor, and the bioreactor is filled with nutrient serum, including a variety of vitamins, electrolytes, animal byproducts, as well as the mouse teratoma cells. And as the bioreactor spins, the cells adhere to the sculpture, and over a period of a month will grow into a very fleshy, but I say fleshy, it looks a little bit like snot rather than the type of flesh that we have. Now, what this project did for me is it transformed my imaginings of the biotech future into a very real, complex understanding of biotech procedures today. And it led me to a new body of work. I realized that Biotechnica was very rooted, again, in filmic monstrosity, the Hulk, Frankenstein visions of the biotech future. And from my experiences in the lab, which were very complex and sometimes very disheartening, I realized that it's substantially more complex than that. In particular, one of the things that I would argue that I had experienced as a result of that was something that Hannah Arendt might describe as the banality of evil, in that the representations of biotech in the public sphere are usually very like King Kong, dun dun dun, dramatically lit. It's incredibly dull and messy and bureaucratic. The very small incremental decisions that are made in the lab. But the one thing that I did see in the lab that I thought was really powerful that I wanted to focus the rest of my research on was a more positive response to the lab rather than sort of a fear-based response. And that was the notion of the laboratory as an ecology. I realized while I was working in those spaces that I was one of the species engaged in an interspecies relationship with all of the other life forms in that space. And that that ecology also involved mutually detrimental as well as mutually beneficial interrelations between myself and these life forms. And it also involved unintended life forms like the bacteria that came in on the bottom of my shoe. So the work that I did after Biotechnica, I really spent a lot of time sort of critically analyzing the visual and written metaphors that we use to describe biotechnology to ourselves, which are really rooted in a very virtualized, computational, sterile, clean, perfect world. But my experience in the lab was actually quite the opposite of that. It was a little bit smelly and bloody and unruly, and more equated to a life model than an AI model that I might imagine based on filmic representation. And so I wanted to suggest in my work and also in my writing that if we perpetuate in the public sphere a model of the laboratory as an ecology, that would shift our ethical relationship as a society to these technologies. That rather than leaving the lab to the specialists or imagining the lab as a CSI sort of virtual environment where beautiful people put data in and data comes out and that's, you know, the end result. That we imagine the lab as an ecology, then we place more sort of reserved, restrained, grateful, sustainable models for engaging in biotech as a society. And in order to achieve that, I started doing alternative art performances within the lab. And I wanted to declare myself as one of the specimens within that space. So I took off all my clothes and got into the hood with the specimens that I was working with. Again, I want to make a more egalitarian relationship or a different relationship than a sort of top-down white coat scientist relationship to the species. I did a variety of these. This is in collaboration with Kira O'Reilly. This is a sterile hood at a closed tissue culture lab at the University of Leiden. We're feeding mouse, hamster, ovary cells, and we're inhabiting the very same site as the cells that we are feeding. This work, to you, may not seem so difficult, but the sort of health and safety and administrative negotiations that went into orchestrating this event were extensive, and it's a great source of pride for me that we were ever able to accomplish it. Kira and I also do a variety of work outside of museum spaces, or outside of laboratory spaces. So this is a piece that we did at the Bach, which is the anatomy lecture hall where Rembrandt painted the anatomy lesson of Dr. Tulp. And here we're reversing the role relationship between the animal and the specimen in the hood. This is the last shoot that we did at the University of Birmingham, again, where we created sort of a hierarchy, or we were thinking of a taxonomy of all the life forms sharing the lab, using their biological collections, and then sort of folding and unfolding ourselves in and out of that space along with them. And this work was exhibited recently at the Art and Field Museum in Bristol, England. The last thing that I sort of did along those realms to sort of challenge or reimagine the lab as an ecological space is I worked with scientists and health and safety officers to bring the laboratory outside. Again, an enormous paperwork feat. So this is called Inside Out Laboratory Ecology, and this is a project that I did with my students at the University of Leiden in Holland, and it was done in collaboration with the Hall Museum. And what we did is we built a portable biotech laboratory for a general public audience, where we allowed people to engage in 3 protocols. One was DNA extraction from kiwi fruit, plant tissue culture using tulips, and bacteria swabs, where you can collect bacteria from your own body and grow it in the lab. And this was really intended, as sort of like a public event where people could engage in a non-hierarchical way with the biotech. But it was also really intended as an opportunity to free the specimens and give them a day off and a picnic. So we modeled after Manet's Luncheon in the Grass, and we did have a naked lady. I forgot to include that image today. It was a really wonderful, transformative event for us, but also for the specimens, giving them an afternoon outside of the laboratory environment. As you can see, my students were quite enthusiastic. They dressed as gentlemen scientists down in the bottom left here, and also as human-animal hybrids. And they helped the general public engage with the technical protocols. So what I want to do today, with the last few minutes of my talk, is introduce to you the lab that I built at the University of Windsor. It's called Incubator, Hybrid Laboratory at the Intersection of Art, Science, and Ecology. And it's in the School of Visual Arts, which is very exciting because there's things that you can do in a visual arts department that you can't do in a scientific environment. And it's sponsored through SSHRC, which is the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada, as well as the University of Windsor. And this lab serves a variety of functions. The first function is as a studio space. You know, I've traveled extensively over the last 10 years, and I'm getting a little tired. And I would like to do projects that I can sustain over periods of years if I want to. Life is very slow, and it's hard to sometimes complete your project within 6 months. It might be more appropriate over 6 years. So I wanted to have my own lab where I could work on my work on a regular basis. It's also an educational facility hosting the bioart, contemporary art, and the life sciences class, as well as I have MFA students in our program who are specifically working on bioart projects in my lab. It's an exhibition venue because a lot of biological artworks cannot leave the lab. You know, a lot of the things that I've shown you thus far probably are not allowed to walk down the street. So people can exhibit works in my space, and people can come and view them in that space. It's also an art installation. I'm really interested in laboratory aesthetics and undermining that sort of cool, clean, perfect scientific environment by altering my lab equipment. And lastly, it's a home base for the portable laboratory that I'm working on for July 2011, where I'm building a large-scale portable bioart lab in the Canadian Rocky Mountains in collaboration with 20 other artists, scientists, and students. This is a picture of my lab. It's awfully cute. It looks sort of more like a studio right now than a lab. I have a couple of big pieces of equipment that are coming in over the summer that will probably take it a little bit closer to the lab space. But I want you to see that I imagine really hybridizing this space. So I've got a chandelier. It's already arrived, and we're having it installed. I'm also having a video projection unit as well as theatrical lighting installed in the space so that we can perform and record our performances and project our performances while we're in there. And next year I will, for a period of time, and I didn't show you some of this other older work, but I quite often will build little labs in a gallery, and before I build the lab, I lay grass sod and keep it alive and growing in the gallery space to sort of bring the lab back outdoors again. So I think I'm going to do that in my lab for a semester as well. These are some of my students from the first class in 2009. We just completed the second class, so it's been running for a couple of years now. They're very